Welcome to Boring History for Sleep. Tonight. We begin a slow, gentle journey through a side of ancient Rome you may not have heard before. Not the wars or the emperors, but the quiet moments, the herbs, the wine, the incense, and the dreams. This is Ancient Romans Got Higher Than You'd Ever Believe, and more. A 16-part story told not with excitement, but with calm. So settle in. Let the past unfold softly. And let your mind drift like smoke through a Roman temple into sleep. There was a time when water wasn't always clean. A time when the midday sun baked rooftops red, when dust hung in the air like a memory. A time when sandals scuffed through quiet courtyards and clay cups clinked softly in shaded gardens. This was ancient Rome, and in ancient Rome, wine was not for celebration. It was for life. Not the heady, rich wine we might imagine today, save for holidays or late dinners. Roman wine was different, thinner, sharper, often mixed with herbs, honey, seawater. Always with water. A good Roman would never drink wine undiluted. That was for barbarians. But still, the wine flowed. Slowly, constantly, gently. You can imagine a quiet Roman villa in the countryside, not far from the Appian Way. The cicadas hum lazily in the olive trees. The midday heat curls the air like smoke. Inside, beneath a shaded portico, a small table is set. There are bowls of olives, a little cheese, some fresh bread dusted with flour. A pitcher of wine already, diluted with cool water, sits sweating gently in a clay jug. A man reclines on a low bench. He wears a simple tunic, the fabric soft from many washings. His sandals are kicked off beneath him. He breaks off a piece of bread and dips it into a little dish of oil, slow and unhurried. He lifts a cup to his lips. The wine is light and sour. A red so thin it almost looks pink. It's flavored with a sprig of thyme, maybe a bit of sweet resin or a pinch of dried rose petals. He sips. The taste is familiar, not exciting. Just daily. And with that sip, his limbs feel a little looser. The sun on his skin grows heavier. The conversation with his neighbor fades in and out, a soft murmur about taxes or grain prices, or perhaps just the shape of clouds. This is how Romans lived, slowly, warmly, gently intoxicated. Even the poor, crowded into tenements in the Subura, drank wine like this. Theirs was rougher, more acidic, more often stretched with water or thickened with herbs, but it flowed all the same. From dawn until dusk, small cups passed between hands like coins. Children drank watered wine too, not to get drunk, but because it was safer than the well. Slaves carried wine jugs on their backs like skin drums, pouring for their masters, then taking a small sip for themselves. Even philosophers, scribbling notes by lamplight, paused to drink between thoughts. No one thought much of it. It wasn't indulgent. It was simply what the body expected. The average Roman, senator or servant, likely walked through life in a permanent state of light intoxication. Not drunk, not dizzy, but softened. Relaxed. The word for wine, vinum, appears everywhere in Roman writing. Not in celebration, but in routine. Recipes call for it. Prayers include it. Contracts are signed over it. Soldiers were paid in it. Even temple rituals demanded it. And in all of this endless, slow-dripping thread of daily wine, the world became a little less sharp. The edges of daily life blurred. A housewife finishing her chores might pause at her kitchen doorway, wipe her brow with a fold of tunic, and take a slow sip. The street outside hums with the wheel of carts and the soft hooves of donkeys. She watches the sky shift from blue to gold and feels not happy. Exactly. But calm. A baker, working through the heat of the afternoon, stops between loaves. His hands dusted with flour, his face red from the oven's breath. He leans back and takes a drink from a cup left near the doorway. A diluted spiced wine, maybe left from the morning. It tastes of warm clay and rosemary. He closes his eyes for a moment and lets the dizziness pass over him like a breeze. This, too, was Rome. Even the senators, reclining in their domus, hosted lunches with wine from Greece or Gaul. Their slaves mixed it carefully with water, 3 parts water, 2 parts wine, sometimes less. They added herbs, perfumes, even pine resin. The air around the table buzzed not with excitement, but with a kind of slow stillness. It wasn't about escape. It was about ease. It's easy to imagine a long lunch that becomes a nap. A guest who leans back against a stone column, wine cup tilted in hand, eyes half closed. A breeze rustles the fig leaves outside. The scent of warm grapes and sun-baked dust fills the air. The world slows. That was the rhythm of Roman life. The empire moved fast, but its people moved slowly. The laws changed. The borders shifted. Armies marched. But in 1,000 quiet homes, in gardens and tenements, in courtyards and fields, wine flowed softly and so the city breathed in this buzz. This shared haze. Even the fountains seemed drowsy, their water trickling into stone basins where pigeons dipped their heads. Even the gods, carved in marble and painted in ochre, seemed to smile with half-lidded eyes, because the whole empire, in some way, was humming gently under the influence, not of power, not of conquest, but of this constant diluted intoxication. A kind of national lullaby poured from clay jugs and stirred with laurel leaves. And still, the day went on. The sun sank behind the rooftops. The shadows grew long. And the cups, now mostly empty, rested on smooth stone tables. Dinner would come later, with more wine. Then sleep in linen beds, with bellies warm and minds heavy. And in the morning, it would begin again. The wine would be watered down. The cups would be filled. The day would unfold like a scroll, one slow line at a time, and no one would think it strange, because being just a little bit buzzed was just a part of being Roman. Tomorrow, we'll step inside a Roman apothecary, quiet, smoky, filled with strange smells and dried leaves. There, behind the counter, someone is grinding poppy seeds into powder. And brewing a potion meant not to intoxicate, but to ease the body into dreams. But for now, you can rest. Let your thoughts drift like wine watered down with memory. Let the haze of ancient Rome roll gently across your skin, warm, dull, and calm. The streets of ancient Rome, even on quieter days, always hummed with a low, constant shuffle. The soft clatter of sandals, the murmur of sellers and servants, the distant clinking of metalwork from the forges. But step just a few doors away from the crowded market, duck under a worn archway, and enter one of the city's quieter corners. A little shop tucked between a bakery and a cloth merchant. And you might find something altogether different. Here. The air is thick, not with noise, but with the scent of dried herbs and ground bark. A dull perfume, earthy and strange. The apothecary's door opens with a tired creak, and inside the light changes, dimmer, cooler, filtered through slatted shutters that let in stripes of afternoon sun. Wooden shelves line the walls, packed from end to end with little ceramic jars, bundles of tied herbs, pale roots hung upside down, and clay bowls filled with powders. Everything is labeled, scratched carefully in Latin on little slips of wax parchment. Papaver, hyacinthus, mandragora. There's no rush here. No shouting. The man behind the counter moves slowly, his hands stained with the faint dust of ground seeds and bark. His robe is simple, belted at the waist, the sleeves rolled to the elbow. His fingers are long and careful, like someone who has spent a lifetime measuring pinches of powder and stirring them into thick pastes. He doesn't greet his customers loudly. He nods. He speaks in a hushed tone, as though every transaction is a secret. And in a way, it is. A woman enters, holding her wrist gently in her other hand, her face pinched with the subtle pain of some dull ache that will not pass. She doesn't ask for something strong. She asks for something common, something that will take the edge off. He nods and turns away, stepping to a shelf filled with brown glass bottles. He chooses two, then lifts a mortar from the table's edge and begins grinding something. Soft, chalky, bitter, poppy seeds, ground slowly until their sweetness begins to rise in the air like warm steam. He adds a pinch of henbane, not too much, and a single drop of thick, golden oil pressed from the seeds of a night-flowering plant. It takes time. He doesn't hurry. He never hurries. This is the rhythm of healing, and it moves as slowly as breath. Around the shop, everything waits in stillness. The bundles of dried lavender tied with twine. The pale roots of mandrake twisted like sleeping limbs. The crumbled leaves of nettle and balm. There's a kind of silence here that feels older than the city itself, not the absence of sound, but the presence of something else. As though the air remembers the hundreds of hands that have reached for peace, and for sleep, and for silence. The mixture he prepares is soft, powdery, faintly, sweet. He hands it to her with a small wooden spoon and instructions to stir it into warm milk just before dusk. To drink slowly, to close the shutters, and to let the body drift without resistance. This wasn't unusual in Rome. The use of herbs, of flowers, of bitter seeds and sticky resins. It was ordinary, like cooking or bathing. Painkillers weren't something extraordinary. They weren't rare or feared. They were part of the body's long conversation with itself. They were part of life. Roman medical texts, some preserved on scrolls, list hundreds of substances used for everything from fevers to broken bones to unquiet dreams. Crushed pearl, if you could afford it. But more often, you'd find poppy oil, opium tincture, crushed willow bark, or dried mint steeped in vinegar. Mandrake, when nothing else would do. The poppy, especially, was a quiet companion to Roman life. Its petals were beautiful, soft, delicate, the color of old blood or fading sunsets. But it was the seeds that mattered. Collected carefully, dried slowly, then pressed or ground or boiled. The effects were not dramatic. At least not when used in moderation. Just a dulling, a softening, a kind of sleepiness that made pain seem like something happening very far away. Not all who came to the apothecary were ill. Some came because sleep eluded them. Some came because their hands shook when they held the pen. Some came because grief made the world feel sharp, too sharp to live in comfortably. And the apothecary, with his slow movements and patient silence, would find something for each of them. He might prepare a paste of poppy and date syrup, folded into fig and left to dry. A calming chew for those whose nights were too long. He might give a woman a sachet of dried chamomile, rose petals, and a single twist of mandrake root to be brewed and sipped under the moon. He might offer a salve for joints, thick with oil and crushed laurel leaf, to be rubbed into the skin until sleep came on its own. The smell of the shop lingers on the skin. Anyone who enters walks out smelling faintly of resin and dried grass. The hands remember the texture of powder. The tongue carries the taste of bitterness long after the drink is gone. But always there is sleep. Eventually, not all dreams were sweet, of course. The stronger herbs, henbane, belladonna, datura, brought visions, sometimes gentle, sometimes strange. But even those have their place, in rituals, in private rites, in pain too great to bear. The line between healing and hallucination was not clear, and that too was understood not with fear, but with quiet respect. Outside Rome, bustled and roared. The markets were noisy, the temples grand, the Senate shouted and schemed. But in the small back rooms of apothecaries, in corners of the city where the light was dim and the scent of herbs hung heavy, time moved differently. A physician might pause before a surgery, standing in the doorway, grinding poppy seeds into a paste that would keep his patient still. A mother might sit beside her child's bed, stirring a bitter tea and humming softly while the fever ran its course. A soldier might carry a little pouch of dried herbs on the march, tucked into the folds of his cloak, to chew when the pain in his shoulder became too sharp. These were not rare events. They were as common as sandals on stone, as familiar as the wear in a tunic's hem. There's something comforting in that, the ordinariness of ancient care. The way pain was met with plants. The way sleep was gently invited, not demanded. The way a body could soften, not through force, but through warmth and scent. And time, even now, if you close your eyes, you might imagine the apothecary's shop. The way the light filtered in, soft and golden. The way the jars clicked when opened, the soft crunch of dried herbs in a bowl, the gentle swirl of a wooden pestle grinding something into dust, the hush of conversation, a request, a question, a quiet thank you. And when the customer leaves, the door creaks shut again. The apothecary returns to his mortar. The scent of poppy and mink lingers in the air. The city outside stirs on, louder, brighter, busier. But in here, it is always dusk. The palace is quiet now, not far from the clang of iron in the barracks and the bark of orders in the forum. The emperor's chambers rest in a hush, wrapped in the hush of heavy curtains and fading lamplight. Outside, the evening slips across the tiled rooftops like a soft cloth, cooling the air, quieting the birds, brushing dust from the worn marble statues that stand still in their alcoves, their stone eyes half closed as if they too are beginning to dream. Inside, the air smells faintly of smoke and olive oil. Not the sharp smoke of firewood, but the soft, curling kind that comes from incense, slow-burning sticks of myrrh and spikenard, laid gently in a bronze dish near the bed. The emperor is not asleep yet. He lies reclined on a couch draped in, thick linen, eyes open, but heavy, waiting. Rest does not always come when it is called. Even for the most powerful man in the world, a servant moves quietly across the room, barefoot on smooth floors, carrying a small clay bowl filled with warm, thick oil infused with lavender, poppy, and a pinch of sweet flag root simmered slowly that morning in the physician's chambers. The bowl is wrapped in cloth to keep it warm. Another servant, older, slower, familiar, kneels beside the emperor and begins the nightly ritual, rubbing the oil into his temples, his wrists, the space behind his ears, all with long, steady strokes. The emperor does not speak. He does not need to. He's had a long day, a parade of petitions and advisors, of scribes bearing letters, generals reporting from distant frontiers, and the endless press of protocol that begins before sunrise and ends, only slightly, with dusk. His body is tired, but his mind continues to churn, as though still seated in council, still weighing matters of coin, of war, of law. And so they soothe him. The servants work in silence. The room darkens by degrees. Oil lamps are trimmed lower and lower until only a few flickering pools of light remain, casting soft shapes on the high ceiling beams above. Somewhere nearby, a lyre is played. Not a song, exactly, but a slow, spiraling arrangement of notes, gently improvised, just enough to fill the silence without disturbing it. The emperor closes his eyes. The fingers at his temples trace slow circles. The scent of the oil fills his nostrils and spreads, warm and herbal, into his chest. Lavender for calm, poppy for sleep, a bit of chamomile and crushed date for sweetness. These were not luxuries reserved for royalty. No, the herbs, the oils, the soft invocation of sleep were practiced throughout Rome, from villas to tenements. But here, in the palace, the ritual is perfected, done with patience, with intention, with old knowledge passed down from court physicians and Greek healers, whose teachings lived on in soft-voiced apprentices who learned by watching, not by asking. Sleep did not come from force. That was understood. It had to be courted gently, coaxed like a cat. The body had to be prepared, bathed in warm water, anointed in fragrant oil, eased into linen that had been laid in the sun earlier that day. The emperor's sheets are soft, smooth, smelling faintly of thyme and almond from the wash. The mattress is stuffed with wool, firm but yielding. 2 pillows, one of goose down, one of herbs. He will choose the herb pillow tonight, a blend of valerian, dried rose, and a touch of mint. Crushed slightly before bed to release the scent. Above him, the ceiling fades as his eyes close again. The rhythm of the massage slows. One servant quietly dips the cloth back into the warm bowl, stirs the oil, and returns to the emperor's shoulders, pressing gently into the joints with practiced hands. The emperor breathes deeply now, in through the nose, out through the mouth, a pattern he was taught as a boy, repeated in the still moments before speeches and battles. And now, In the final hour of the day, some emperors had their own sleeping potions, mixtures prepared by their trusted physicians, not to knock them out, but to slow the blood, to hush the thoughts. A thick syrup of poppy and honey, perhaps, or a wine, infused with lettuce and violet leaf, taken by candlelight from a small golden spoon. For others it was incense, a blend of cinnamon, frankincense, and a rare Arabian resin that smoked blue and burned, breathed in slowly until the thoughts grew vague and the world became soft around the edges. For the emperors who could not sleep, whose minds carried too many shadows, stronger potions were sometimes used. A drop of opium resin dissolved in wine. A little pinch of ground mandrake root, just enough to turn dreams from sharp to strange, but always with care, always with caution. The line between sleep and stupor was one that even the mighty feared to cross. Back in the chamber, the ritual nears its end. The oil is nearly gone. The servants wipe their hands, quietly step away, and draw the curtains tighter. Outside, the last lamp is extinguished. The sound of the lyre fades. Only the slow breath of the emperor remains. Tomorrow he will rise again, wrapped in purple, burdened by empire. But tonight he is just a man soothed by herbs, by oil, by the quiet comfort of ritual dot, and far beyond the palace, across the rooftops of Rome, others lie down in search of sleep. Some with potions, some with prayer, some with the slow breath of memory, but all of them chasing the same gentle hush, the same release, the same soft letting go. Dot, it is strange to think that something so simple, so old, so gentle, was used by emperors and laborers alike. A pinch of poppy, a warmed cloth, a hand. To the temple, sleep was not a mystery to the Romans. It was something to be approached like a ceremony, a slow descent, a letting go of the day, a return to something quieter. Dot, and in this quiet, in this warm haze of oil and incense, there was peace. Dot, not dramatic, not powerful, just peace. Dot, it begins with smoke. Dot, thin at first, just a breath, a veil, rising from the base of a bronze dish, where a priest has carefully laid a pinch of incense. Then more, a thicker cloud, curling upwards, slow and steady, until it catches the light from the flames and glows gold against the stone. The smoke begins to fill the room, not like fog, but like breath, soft, warm, living. This is a temple. Not one of the great ones, not the mighty Pantheon or the crowded steps of Jupiter's hill. No, this is smaller, older, tucked into a side street, its columns worn smooth by time, its offerings arranged with quiet care. The air here is cooler than outside, and darker. The high windows let in only slivers of light, thin as reeds. Everything inside is bathed in a soft hush and in the scent of sacred things. The scent is hard to describe. It is sweet and sharp, dry and thick, heavy with layers, burned frankincense, ground myrrh, crushed laurel leaves, dried juniper, a trace of cinnamon bark. It clings to the robes of the priests. It lingers in the hair of the worshippers. It settles into the folds of marble statues, whose blank eyes have watched these rituals 1,000 times before. The priest moves slowly. He wears white, the fabric, draped loose and simple, tied at the waist with a red cord. His steps echo across the stone floor. He lifts the incense with 2 fingers and sprinkles it over the coals. Another wave of smoke rises, catching the light like mist at dawn. The crowd does not speak. They breathe. They wait. Dot, it is the festival of Saturnalia, a time when the order of Rome turns upside down. A time of mischief, yes, but also of offering, of release, of forgetting. The city outside is full of celebration. Garlands strung across doorways, servants wearing the togas of masters, dice games in the streets. But here, inside the temple, it is slower, softer. The ritual is not about spectacle. It is about stillness. The worshippers kneel or sit cross-legged on the cool floor. Some lean back against the columns. Others rest their heads in their hands. A few have already begun to drift, not asleep, not awake, but in that middle, place where thoughts lose shape and time stretches thin. It is not just the incense that works on them. It is the rhythm, the slowness, the sound of the priest's voice, low, measured, repeating the old names. The old phrases, the invocations passed down from tongue to tongue across generations. Saturnus, Dies Antiqui Temporis. Saturn, God of the old time, ... The words are not meant to be understood. Not now. They are meant to be felt, to wrap around the body like smoke, to settle into the breath. The priest's voice rises and falls like waves, and beneath it, the faint tapping of a drum. Far away, one beat every few seconds, slow as a heartbeat just before sleep. Among the gathered is a woman, middle-aged, her hair braided back, her eyes half closed. She's come every year for as long as she can remember. She has brought no offering but herself, and that is enough. She sits with her hands folded, her palms warm against each other, her lips barely moving with the prayers. She breathes in, deeply, again and again, until the incense settles in her lungs and her thoughts begin to slow. It is not intoxication as we think of it. It is not a high. It is not euphoria. It is ... distance. Distance from the body, from the self, from the noise of life outside. The longer she sits in the smoke, the more she forgets her errands, her worries, the ache in her knees. She becomes still ... Other temples had other rites. At the temple of Isis, it was blue lotus that filled the air, the sacred flower of sleep and ecstasy. Worshippers might drink infusions made from its petals, laced with honey and sacred water. At the shrines of Dionysus, wild herbs were burned, and sometimes stronger ones were chewed, not for sleep, but for the trance that preceded it. That dancing twilight where the soul seemed to step just outside the skin. But here, in the temple of Saturn, the intoxication is quiet. It does not rise, it sinks. The smoke grows thicker now. The doors remain open, but only just. Light and shadow swirl together in the rising fog. Someone near the back leans against a pillar, head bowed, lips parted. Not in prayer, but in something like sleep, the sacred kind. The sleep that comes with ritual, with rhythm, with scent and surrender. The priest walks between them, sprinkling more incense on the coals. His eyes are calm, his face expressionless. This is not showmanship. This is service. His hands, trained over decades, know the exact pinch of crushed resin to use. He does not need to think. He simply does. Some say that in these temples, dreams were received not from within, but from beyond. That when the smoke was right and the mind still and the breath even, the gods might whisper something into the silence. Not in words, but in images, feelings, memories that were not quite your own. Some say the oracles began like this. But whether the gods speak or not, the silence speaks enough. And in this quiet temple, in this haze of sacred smoke, there's no separation between the divine and the human. There's only warmth, stillness, surrender. The ritual begins to close. The priest gives a final chant, a soft repetition, almost a lullaby, and gestures toward the flame. The incense is allowed to burn down. The worshippers slowly rise. Some do not. Some remain seated, eyes closed, lost in thought, or prayer, or something else entirely. There's no rush. There's never any rush. They will leave when they are ready. Outside, the world continues. The streets sing with Saturnalia. Laughter, music, wine, the clatter of dice on stones. But those who emerge from the temple walk differently. They are not smiling. They are not laughing. They are softened, slowed, as though their skin still holds the weight of the smoke, and their breath still tastes of crushed myrrh. This, too, was Rome. Not just conquest and marble and law, but incense, prayer, fog, ritual intoxication that brought not chaos, but calm. Not all Roman highs were wild. Some were sacred. Some came with silence and sandalwood, with chant and echo and candlelight. And in those temples, where smoke turned the light golden and the walls disappeared into shadow, even the most restless minds found a moment of peace. The sun rises slowly over the hills. Outside Rome, not with drama or flair, but with a steady blooming of light that rolls gently down into the valley, brushing over the dusty vineyards and the still green olive groves. The air is cool at first, cool enough to see your breath, cool enough to make the earth seem shy, still wrapped in its night softness. But the heat is coming. Everyone feels it. And so the workers begin early. They walk quietly, still half asleep, sandals wrapped in rags. The tools slung across their shoulders, clinking gently with each step. Some carry baskets. Others carry sickles. One or two carry small clay jugs with cork stoppers tied on with twine, the liquid inside sloshing faintly as they walk. It's not wine, not exactly. Not in the way we think of it today. It's posca, a mix of sour wine, vinegar, and water, sometimes infused with herbs or garlic or bits of dried fruit. Sharp, tangy, strange to the modern tongue, but to them, it is comfort, it is habit. It is a gentle way to begin a long day in the fields. As the sun lifts, the air thickens. The rows of grapevines stretch out in long, endless lines. The ground between them is dry, the dust rising in little clouds under every footstep. The workers begin slowly, no one rushes. They know the rhythm. There's time. The sickles move through vines with a quiet shick, and the trimmed clusters drop softly into the baskets below. In the distance, birds call from the trees. The insects are beginning to hum, weaving a high, sleepy chorus beneath the bigger sounds of life. A man pauses to wipe his brow. He leans against a wooden post, opens his jug, and takes a long drink of the posca. The liquid is warm, but the vinegar cuts through the heat like a cool cloth on the tongue. There is a little thyme in it, something his wife added before dawn. Maybe a few crushed berries. Just enough to make it taste like something more than sour, just enough to remind him of comfort. He drinks slowly, then wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. Around him, others are doing the same. Sitting on low walls, resting in the thin strips of shade, sipping from clay cups, from gourds, from hollowed horns. The drink is not for celebration. It's for endurance, for dulling the edge of fatigue, for making the day feel less sharp. They aren't drunk, not really. Just softened up. It's a kind of rhythm more than a feeling. A slow layering of haziness that grows over the course of the day. With each sip, the body becomes a little less tense. The sun becomes a little less cruel. The hours pass not quickly, but quietly, as though someone is gently tugging time forward, hand over hand. No one speaks much. But when they do, the voices are low, almost musical, murmured jokes, and little stories passed from row to row like folded notes. A story about someone's uncle who drank too much the night before and tried to ride a donkey backward into town. A memory of last harvest, when the vines were so full the baskets overflowed. A prediction about the weather. Maybe rain. Maybe not. But even this isn't spoken with urgency. There's no urgency here. The sun dictates everything. And the wine, even this poor man's vinegar wine, slows the rest out around midday. The workers retreat under a grove of fig trees to rest. They lie on their backs in the thin shade, the light flickering through the branches like water. Someone has brought bread, hard and flat. Someone else has a bit of cheese wrapped in a cloth. The food is simple but filling. They eat without ceremony, breaking pieces with their hands and chewing slowly, letting the time stretch. No one hurries back to the fields. The heat is thick now, the kind of heat that presses into the skin and makes the eyes heavy. Some of the workers drift into shallow naps, their heads resting on their arms, their bodies curved into the dry earth as if the land itself is cradling them. Others sip from their jugs again, not because they're thirsty, but because the sour wine keeps the dust from settling in the mouth, because it makes the sleep deeper. The herb additions vary. In some regions, they add coriander or fennel. Others add rue, bitter, strong, with a strange metallic aftertaste that lingers on the tongue and leaves the thoughts feeling floaty. Nothing extravagant, nothing expensive. Just what grows nearby. Just what makes the hours pass more easily as the day fades. The work resumes, slower now. The vines cast longer shadows. The birds are quieter. The sickles move with less sharpness, more rhythm. as though the arms that hold them are no longer fully concerned with precision. The baskets fill. The sun begins to set. The sky turns the color of dusty rose, and the last of the posca is passed around, shared from one worker to another, the final drink of the day, taken with a kind of quiet gratitude. When they return to the village, their feet are dirty, their backs sore, but their minds are light. The wine has done its work, not to inebriate, but to soften, to dull the ache of labor, to make everything feel just slightly more distant. In the courtyards, children play. A dog sleeps under a table. Someone sings a little song as they sweep, the words drifting on the warm night air, like ash from a hearth. Even in the poorest homes, there's a little wine or something like it, waiting. Diluted with water, flavored with herbs from the windowsill pots, warmed gently on the hearth. The men drink, the women too. Not much, just enough to blur the edges of the day. Just enough to feel like the night is offering a gentle hand, guiding. Then towards sleep got. It's strange, maybe, to think of intoxication as something so ordinary, so woven into the fabric of daily life. But to them, it wasn't intoxication. It was balance. It was comfort. It was survival. Wine dulled the sore joints, calmed the dry throat, took the edge off sorrow and silence alike. It didn't pull them out of life. It helped them live it. And in that soft haze, beneath the sky now full of stars, above the fields now quiet. And still, the workers lay down on worn mats, their bodies tired but calm, their thoughts warm and slow and drifting toward dreams. Before the crowd roared, before the trumpet sounded, before the sand was stained and the blades were drawn, there was silence, not far from the Colosseum before it bore that name. When it was still just the great amphitheatrum, pulsing at the heart of Rome, there stood a smaller building. Tucked among workshops and bakeries, near the smell of leather and smoke, it was easy to miss. Its walls were worn, its windows narrow, but inside, behind its heavy wooden doors, the world moved slowly. This was the ludus, the training ground of gladiators, and in its quieter corners there was pain, but not the public kind. The private kind, the ache of joints, the sting of bruises, the weight of wounds that healed too quickly, or not at all and with the pain. There was care. The room is dim, the shutters barely cracked. A few braziers smolder with low coals. The floor is cool stone, swept clean, though the scent of sweat lingers beneath the sharper smells, oil, herbs, a faint trace of iron. A few men lie stretched on low wooden benches, their eyes closed, their limbs still. They are large, but quiet, not asleep, exactly, but suspended. Waiting, one by one, the caretakers begin their work. They are not doctors in the formal sense. They do not wear robes or recite oaths, but they know the body. They've learned by touch, by centuries of bruised muscle and torn flesh. They prepare thick oils in small bronze bowls, warming them over the coals. The mixtures are simple, but precise. Crushed poppy seeds steeped in olive oil. A handful of rosemary and sage, bruised with a pestle. Sometimes a spoon of honey, or resin, or dried bay leaf. Thick, dark liquids that smell like earth and fire. The first man groans softly as the oil touches his skin, not from pain, but from release. His shoulder, stiff from sparring, is rubbed in slow circles. The poppy oil soaks in, carried deep by the warmth of the hand. The scent rises with the heat, earthy, calming, a bit bitter, but sweet at the edges. The rhythm is everything, not rushed, not vigorous, just steady. So steady that time begins to slow. Another man lies on his side, his ribs wrapped in linen, soaked in vinegar and herb, a mix of comfrey and yarrow, plants known to knit things back together, or at least dull the awareness that they haven't yet. His breath is even. His eyes flutter behind closed lids. He is drifting, not into sleep, quite, but into a state just beside it, where the body no longer flinches and the mind no longer clings. There's no conversation in this space. Words are too sharp. Everything is done in gesture, a nod, a glance, a low murmur when something hurts too much or too little. Even laughter, when it comes, is muted. The walls absorb it. The air here is not the air of the arena. There are no shouts, no chants, only the soft, wet sound of oil being stirred. Only the brush of cloth over skin. Outside, the city is waking. Carts begin to roll over the cobblestones. Roosters call from distant yards, but inside the room stays slow. The caretakers move from one man to another. They kneel, they pour, they press, they whisper, sometimes old words that aren't quite Latin anymore. Not spells, exactly, but close. Little comforts handed down from mothers and midwives. Words for healing. Words for rest. There's a kind of tenderness in it. Strange, perhaps. When you think of who these men are. Fighters. Killers. Some. Or slaves turned performers. Symbols of strength. But in these early hours, before the sand is raked and the armor buckled on, they are simply bodies. Human. Hurting. And even the strongest body wants peace. Some of the caretakers leave sleeping. Sachets beside the men when they leave, little cloth bundles tied with thread, filled with lavender, with crushed chamomile, with a trace of valerian or lemon balm. To be tucked beneath the head. To be breathed in as sleep, real sleep, finally. Commies, some nights, especially after the fights, the men will drink stronger mixtures. Dark wine steeped with poppy and fig. Just enough to dull the dreams. Just enough to quiet the pain where stitching has closed what should never have been opened. And yet these substances were never discussed in public. The use of herbs, of oils, of pain-soothing plants, it wasn't glamorous. It wasn't Ramon, in the heroic sense. But it was present. Always beneath the surface of spectacle. In the shadows before dawn, the old records mention little, but what they do mention is telling. Recipes for poultices. Instructions for ointments. The use of opium in preparation for surgery. The boiling of crushed roots to be laid warm over joints. These were not mysteries. They were practices, passed hand to hand, like tools. Like memories Dot and the gladiators, for all their strength, their discipline, needed them, not because they were weak, but because pain, left untended, becomes a kind of poison. And even the most celebrated warrior needs sleep, needs silence, needs a moment in which no one is watching, no one is cheering, no one is asking anything of him at all. The oil is nearly gone now. The bowls sit empty beside the dying coals. The last of the poppy has been massaged in. The linens have been wrapped and tied. The men lie still. Some breathe with the deep regularity of sleep. Others stare at the rafters, their eyes half-focused, as if watching a memory float just above them. No one moves. There is no need. The arena will come. It always does. The shouting, the dust, the moment when calm gives way to chaos. But not yet. For now, there is only this, a room, a warmth, a ritual of healing that smells faintly of sage and blood. The marble floor is cool beneath bare feet, polished smooth by centuries of sandals and servants. Along the walls, the torches flicker softly, their flames dancing in little arcs of golden orange, casting shadows onto painted frescoes of gods and vines and clouds. The air smells of figs and honey, of roasted meats and crushed mint leaves, of distant incense still clinging to the folds of drapery. But most of all, it smells of wine, warm, open, ever-flowing wine. It's late, though no one quite knows the hour. The light has faded outside, but no one noticed it going. Time doesn't move the same way here. Not in these rooms, not in the space between the first course and the seventh. Somewhere, perhaps, the city is bustling. Slaves are bargaining. Soldiers are marching. But here in the atrium of this Roman villa, time is full of wine. The guests recline on couches made of wood and bronze, draped with soft fabrics. They lie not upright, but sideways, half sprawled, elbow to cushion, feet tucked behind or left bare and loose. One leans lazily against another. One has already slipped into a half doze, his head bobbing slightly to the left. A low laugh rises from the far corner, but it fades before reaching the ceiling. Plates are brought, then taken away. Dishes of olives, dates, pine nuts soaked in syrup. Platters of lamb and coriander sauce. Fish wrapped in fig leaves, still steaming. And in between every bite, there is wine. Not just one kind, but many light wine, dark wine, spiced wine, sweet wine mixed with rose water or pepper or crushed. Herbs, it comes in bronze jugs and silver cups, some warmed over coals, some poured chilled over bits of snow brought down from the mountains and kept hidden in straw. And it's not drunk in haste. No one gulps, no one hurries. The wine is sipped, swirled, sometimes just held in the mouth as if to taste the memory of the vineyard it came from. It is diluted, yes, always with water, but the dilution is not a denial. It's a softening, a gentling, something to let the warmth come slowly, like sleep walking toward the edge of the bed. The musicians play softly in the background, the pluck of a lyre, the low hum of a flute. The songs don't have beginnings or endings. They just drift like smoke winding between the columns and around the guests. Someone hums along for a few seconds, then stops. Someone else spills a few drops of wine on their tunic and doesn't seem to notice the conversation has grown quiet now. Earlier there were stories. Someone quoted Virgil, or maybe pretended to. Someone boasted about a hunting trip in the hills, or a senator's affair, or a shipwreck that almost happened but didn't. But those words have thinned now. What remains? Is murmurs, the clinking of a cup being set down, the sound of breathing, the hush that comes when people are together, but no longer trying. One guest asks for more wine. The slave pours it gently, careful not to spill. The liquid catches the firelight as it moves. Dark red, almost black in the cup. There's something in it tonight, not just wine. A bit of cinnamon, maybe. A pinch of ground poppy. Nothing. Dangerous. Just enough to loosen the shoulders. Just enough to make the room feel like it's floating slightly. The host is asleep. No one minds. He's slumped back, his hand resting on his chest, his ringed fingers twitching now and then. As if in a dream, the others have softened too. Eyes half-lidded, arms hanging over cushions, words slower than before. No one suggests ending the evening. No one remembers how long it's been. These banquets were never about time. They were about the blur, the middle space, the gentle unraveling of thought. A young woman lies with her head against another's lap. She's watching the ceiling, tracing invisible lines in the painted sky above. Her lips are stained with wine. Her fingers twirl a thread from the pillow tassel. She says nothing, but she smiles, not at anything in particular, but at the weightless feeling of being here, of being warm and still and full of food and softness and slowness. Someone begins to sing, just a few lines, a lullaby, maybe, or a love song. The melody is old, older than the house, older than the city, perhaps. One of those songs that sounds the same no matter where you hear it. It rises and falls once or twice, then vanishes. The slaves have withdrawn. Their movements now are like shadows, quiet, practiced, almost invisible. They refill the cups that need refilling. They remove the plates no one has touched in hours. They adjust the lamps to give just a little more light, then a little less. Always less. Even the torches seem to burn lower now, as if the flames themselves are drowsy, and the guests, still half reclined, still blinking slowly, have reached that place between waking and dreaming. Some are asleep, truly asleep, mouths open just slightly, hands limp over the edges of the couches. Others hover in a kind of fog where thoughts no longer connect, where memories bleed into dreams, and dreams into the present. One man tries to speak. He begins a sentence, realizes he's forgotten the start of it, and chuckles quietly to himself. No one minds. No one asks him to try again, and so the feast continues. Not with food, not with talk, but with presence. With the shared feeling of stillness. The kind of communion that comes not from wine alone, but from the soft surrender of the mind. No one says goodnight. No one stands. The party doesn't end. It simply dissolves, Not all at once, but like a tide going out, leaving everyone slightly lower, slightly calmer, slightly farther from the shore of waking life that it begins, as many things do in Rome, with a quiet walk down a side alley. The evening air has settled over the city like a soft shawl. Dust hangs low over the stones, and somewhere, faintly, someone plays a reed pipe, not for an audience, just for themselves. The sound drifts through the streets like incense, winding between doorways, dissolving in the open squares. And down here, in a street too narrow for a cart and too crooked for the wind to follow, the lamps are low, and the smell of herbs hangs thick in the air. This isn't the grand part of the city, not where senators stroll or fountains sparkle. This is the corner near the back of the marketplace, where dried flowers hang from lintels, where shelves bow under the weight of clay jars, where whispers do more than shouting ever could. Here is where love is bottled, not love as poets tell it, not the aching sonnets, the bronze statues, the public vows, but the quieter kind, the kind that stirs in the dark of the stomach, not the heart, the kind that hopes, not loudly, but softly. That maybe with the right tea, or the right powder, or the right scent left on the skin, someone might linger a moment longer. Speak a little lower. Touch a little sooner. The door to the shop opens without a sound. Inside, everything is warm wood and low ceilings. Dried herbs hang in careful bundles from the beams. Anise, wild fennel, dried rose hips, tiny purple blossoms that crumble if you touch them too soon. Jars line the walls, all unmarked, but known by heart. The smell is layered. Honeyed roots, crushed seeds, the musty comfort of age and warmth that the merchant doesn't rise when you enter. She's old, but not in a frail way. Her hands are dark with crushed leaves, and her eyes barely look up as she continues grinding something in a heavy bowl. The pestle moves in slow, practiced circles, like she's coaxing the memory out of it. She doesn't ask what you want. She already knows. You've come for love? Or maybe for longing? For something to soften the edge of the evening? For something to stir into warm wine and drink by lamplight, hoping, perhaps, that someone might smile in just the right way. She stands only when the mixture is ready, a fine powder, the color of late summer, half sweet, half bitter. She pours it into a wax-sealed packet and ties it with string. You offer a coin. She accepts it. Nothing more is said, and outside again. The street is the same, quiet, crumbling, close, but something in your pocket now hums with potential, not magic. Nothing so dramatic, but something a little older than magic and a little softer. The Romans believed, not always out loud, that certain things could change the course of an evening. Not fate, but feelings. A cup of wine stirred with crushed fig seeds and honey. A touch of hyacinth rubbed behind the ear. Powdered anise sprinkled onto warm bread. There were recipes, not official ones, not in public scrolls or carved on stone, but passed hand to hand. Mother to daughter, whispered between friends under the colonnade. Tucked into the back pages of a cook's notes, wild carrot and date syrup, mallow and coriander soaked in almond milk, saffron dissolved in red wine until the drink turned the color of a deep dusk. Not aphrodisiacs in the way we think of now. Not sharp, not instant, but slow, gentle, subtle. Something that softened the space between bodies. Something that reminded you of the curve of a hand or the warmth of breath on your shoulder. Even the poets, beneath their grand declarations, knew it. Ovid in his quieter lines hinted at the power of scent of oils of wine stirred just so. The apothecaries knew more than they admitted. And many of the women, especially the older ones, the ones who watched more than they spoke, carry these recipes with them, worn smooth like river stones in the pocket of memory, got back in your apartment. The packet is unwrapped by lamplight. The powder is finer than you remember. It smells of dried pear and something faintly mint-like, though neither is quite right. It clings to the spoon like it wants to stay. You warm the wine slowly, not to boiling, never boiling, just enough to wake it. The clay cup holds heat well. When the powder goes in, it darkens immediately, blooming in slow circles, like ink dropped into water. You stir, you wait. You breathe it in, and you drink. It doesn't strike you like lightning. There's no shiver, no sharpness, only warmth. A warmth that begins behind the eyes and spreads to the ribs, to the fingertips, to the space behind the knees. Your breath slows, your shoulders fall. You smile, not because of something, but simply because maybe someone will knock. Maybe not, but it doesn't matter. You are already held in something soft, something old, something kind. The drink doesn't bring love. It brings the possibility of love. And sometimes that's enough. And wrong, the night stretched. Long and slow. Lovers weren't always declared. Often they were waited for. Longed for in a quiet room with a warm drink and herbs that smelled of longing itself. And if no one came, still the tea was drunk. Still the body warmed. Still, the dreams were sweet. Not every love story needed an ending. Some just needed a beginning, or even just the hope of one. The villa was quiet by midday. The servants had drawn the curtains to block the harsh brightness, and the thick woven cloth cast everything in a sleepy amber light. From the garden beyond, a fountain murmured, not loudly, but just enough to break the stillness in gentle intervals, like breath rising and falling. Bees hummed beyond the walls. The air indoors was still. Gaius lay reclined on a long couch. Not the formal kind used for guests or banquets, but below, cushioned one in his private study, where no one but the physician and the old housekeeper were permitted to linger. His head rested against folded linen. His jaw hung slightly, slack, and his eyes, though open, did not seem to fix on anything it had started 2 days earlier. A pain, small at first, somewhere deep in the back of his mouth. A tooth, swelling at the root. Not a new pain, not a dramatic one, but steady and sharp. The kind that tugs behind the eyes and makes sleep difficult. They had tried the usual remedies. Cool water rinses, crushed mint leaves, and vinegar. A little ground myrrh packed into the cheek. But by the second night, Gaius could no longer rest. His speech was thick, his temper shorter. He asked for something stronger. The physician, an older man with a careful voice, had suggested mandrake. It was not uncommon. Used carefully, it could dull pain, ease anxiety, and help bring on sleep. A dark root split like a human body and fragrant in a strange way. Part earth, part sweetness, part something hard to name. It was dried, powdered, and mixed into warm wine. A small amount. Just a pinch. But Gaius, impatient, aching, and proud, had doubled the dose now. The house was still. The physician had come and gone. He said the nobleman would sleep it off, that no real harm had been done, that the mandrake would simply pull him down for a while into something like a deep, watery sleep. Not death, not quite madness, just distance. Servants moved softly through the halls. They spoke only in whispers, if at all. The old housekeeper sat beside the door with her sewing, her needle barely making a sound as it dipped in and out. Of the linen, now and then she looked up, not out of fear, but WTK. Nenius.Gaius stirred once. His hand twitched, then stilled again. His lips moved, though no sound came. Inside, within his mind, the world had shifted. It wasn't frightening. Not really. It felt more like being underwater, but warmly so. The kind of water that carries you, that suspends. Time was gone, or perhaps it was stretched like wax melting in the sun. The room was both there and not there. Sometimes he felt. He was back in the garden, watching bees float from bloom to bloom. Sometimes he thought he was very small. A boy again, hiding under the dining couch while guests reclined above. Other moments were stranger. He thought he heard voices, but not speaking to him, just speaking somewhere nearby. Familiar voices, as if from a neighboring room, but muffled. A phrase he half recognized. A laugh. A lullaby. Then silence again. The mandrake blurred the edges of everything. Nothing was sharp. His own body felt farther than before, not absent, but soft, as if it had been wrapped in 1,000 layers of wool. The curtain shifted. Light moved. The housekeeper rose only to light an oil lamp. Then she sat again. Later, though it was impossible to tell how much later, Gaius mumbled something. It might have been a name. His lips moved again. Slower this time. His hands rose slightly, like he was reaching through fog. Then they fell. There was no panic in the house. No rush. Only this slow unfolding. This drawn-out dream. The physician had said it would pass. Mandrake could cloud the mind, but it left quietly, like smoke. And so they waited. Somewhere inside the dream, Gaius began to see things, not visions, not gods or ghosts or golden flames. Just moments. His mother, pouring warm oil into a clay lamp, a slave boy laughing as he spilled a basket upon granites. In the courtyard, the flicker of a torch seen from a boat as it left the harbor, each moment soft, each one unattached to the next. They did not come in order. They did not last long. But they floated through him, one after another, like dust motes in slanting sun. This was not madness, not in the way people feared. It was not rage or frenzy. It was not dangerous. It was simply untethered. A temporary forgetting of where the self began and ended. Some Romans feared mandrake for that very reason. They said the root screamed when pulled from the ground, that it could steal your soul if you looked too long at its twisted shape. But others, healers, midwives, dreamers, saw in it a tool, a plant that grew in the cracks between pain and rest. Between thought and dreaming. Outside, the bees had gone. The light had shifted. A dog barked once, distntly. Inside. Slowly began to return. Not all at once. First with breath, then with the heaviness of his limbs. Then the awareness of the cushion beneath his head. A name floated into his mind, his own. Then another, his sister's. Then the sound of water in the fountain. Real water. Not imagined. He did not open his eyes for a long time. When he did, the room was dim, and the oil lamp burned low beside him. The housekeeper had gone. A blanket had been laid across his legs. He blinked. His mouth was dry. But the pain, the tooth, the ache that had begun this whole drift was gone. Not cured. Not healed, but softened. Held at a distance. He would later say he remembered very little of those hours. Just a sense of warmth, of being far away and near at once. Of someone singing, perhaps. Of floating. He would not speak of it again. And the mandrake root would remain in the apothecary's jar, on a high shelf, behind others that smelled less strange. It would be used again for others, in small doses. Just enough to smooth the edges of pain. Just enough to bring rest. Not dreams. In Rome. Herbs were not feared. Not truly. They were companions to sleep, to sorrow, to relief. Even when they wandered too far, they wandered softly. They did not snatch the mind away. They simply let it float. For a time, the garden was not large. It did not need to be. Its walls were low, and the gate was never locked. In the early morning, the dew clung gently to the broad leaves, and the smell of warm soil rose into the air with the sun. A place not of grandeur, but of care, where each plant had a purpose, each root a memory, and each leaf a youth that had been whispered through generations. The Romans had many such gardens. Not just the grand estates with trimmed hedges and marble fountains, but smaller, quieter plots tucked behind villas, nestled beside apothecaries, and spread in tidy rows along temple courtyards. Here, among the curling vines and low herbs, the ancient world grew its remedies. And its dreams. You might begin your walk just after sunrise, when the garden still holds the hush of night. The stones are cool beneath your feet. The sky above is pale, beginning to brighten, but not yet harsh. There's a soft clink of a watering jug nearby, and the slow creak of a gardener's sandals on damp earth. No one hurries here. Lavender brushes against your leg as you pass, its scent rising immediately, calm and clean. The Romans didn't know every compound by name, but they understood the effect. Lavender eased the mind. It was steeped in wine, to make sleep come quicker, burned in sick rooms to calm the breath, and sewn into pillows for restless children. You run your fingers along its stalks. They feel dusty, alive, waiting dot nearby. Poppies nod in the morning light. Their petals are delicate, red like the inside of a pomegranate. But it's the pod you notice. That round, pale green bulb that weeps a thick, bitter milk when cut. Opium. The Romans used it in small amounts. Never casually, but not fearfully either. A few drops mixed with wine could silence pain, soothe grief, or coax the dying into a gentler sleep. A little more, and the dreams came longer. Stranger, but still, the plant was respected. It was neither cursed nor praised. Simply used, carefully. Quietly the bees are waking now. You hear their soft thrum as they visit the chamomile. Tiny white, flowers with yellow hearts, gently bitter when steeped. A favorite of Roman women for calming the stomach, settling nerves, or easing into sleep after a long day. You remember stories of mothers pressing warm cloths soaked in chamomile tea to the foreheads of fussy children, whispering lullabies as the herbs did their work. Not a potion, not a cure. Just help, just warmth. Just sleep to your right. A cluster of thick-leafed plants with purple-white blossoms, henbane. You keep your distance. Its scent is sharper, its effects stronger. Used sometimes for surgeries, or in religious rituals where the body needed to be still and the mind somewhere else. Hallucinogenic in higher doses. Too much could confuse memory, or blur the line between waking and dreaming. But here in the garden, it grows quietly among the others, not hidden. Just respected Dot, an old gardener, passes you, nodding silently. He's holding a basket of freshly picked leaves, perhaps horehound or balm or dried petals from the nightshade. You don't ask. He walks slowly, as though each step is part of a rhythm you've only just begun to hear. The rhythm of tending, cutting, collecting, of turning soil, pouring water, harvesting at the right hour. Not too early, never too late. Rosemary grows close to the stone wall. Its scent is strong in the warmth, piney and bright. Romans used it for memory. For grief, it was placed on funeral pyres, tucked into wreaths, and brewed into teas. Its branches were burned in houses where sorrow lingered too long, to invite new dreams, fresh air, better days. As you touch a branch, the oil clings to your fingers. The scent follows you. In one corner, shaded by a fig tree, grows the mandrake. Low and thick, the root, deep in the earth, has a strange shape, almost like a body curled in sleep. The plant is quiet now, but you can feel something in it, as though it remembers every dose it has ever offered. The old woman who used too much, the soldier who slipped into a painless sleep, the midwife who used just enough. It hums softly with those stories, even as its leaves stir lazily in the breeze. A small stone basin nearby holds water, and a handful of petals float on its surface. From poppy, from chamomile, from violet, it is not a shrine. Just a moment of beauty. Someone placed the flowers there earlier, perhaps with a whispered hope for rest. Perhaps just out of habit. As the sun rises higher, the garden warms, the scents mingle. Dried thyme, a pinch of rue, the faint perfume of flowering hyssop. You begin to feel drowsy, not because of a potion, but because of the gentle abundance of it all, the peace of growing things, the slow, unhurried tending, the knowing that someone somewhere will need these leaves, that each root, each stem, carries the possibility of relief. Some plants will be dried and stored in clay jars. Others will be mixed fresh with honey or wine. A few will be offered at temples. And some, the stronger ones, will be used only in the quietest corners, by hands that know how to measure not just weight, but intention. In Rome, medicine was not divorced from nature, nor from ritual, nor from rest. The gardens were places of healing not only because of what they grew, but because of how they were cared for, slowly, reverently, as though every seed held a secret that didn't need to be spoken, only tended, even. Those who never saw the gardens tasted their effects. and a warm cup passed before bed, and the balm rubbed into sore joints, in the incense that drifted through the sleeping chambers of the old, or the perfume that clung to the robes of temple priestesses. These were not drugs as we think of them. They were part of life, a quiet part, but constant. You reach the end of the path. The stone bench is cool in the shade. You sit. You close your eyes. The garden hums, not loudly. Just enough the bees still work. The leaves rustle softly. A petal falls into the basin, barely touching the water before it disappears. This was where sleep began. Not always in the bedchamber, but here in the care, the cultivation, the trust in small leaves and patient hands. You breathe in, and the breath feels older than you doubt. It's late. Not night exactly, but late enough that the house is hushed, and the lamps have been lit one by one. Their soft golden glow glimmers gently across the floor, flickering just slightly with the movement of warm air through open windows. Outside, the stone courtyard is still, not silent, but content, the kind of stillness that settles when most of the day's work is done, and only the careful work remains. The physician's home isn't grand, not like the villas of the wealthy, or the temples of the gods, but it is calm. The walls are thick with age, and the air carries the soft, bitter scent of dried herbs, old books, and polished wood. There's a small room at the back of the house, just past a narrow hallway where sandals have worn down the tile into soft dips. The room is square, with shelves built right into the walls, shelves lined with clay pots, bundles of dried stems, curls of bark, tiny glass vials, and pouches of powdered roots. Every container is unhurriedly labeled in ink. Papaver, Mira, Mandragora, Melissa. Some names are Greek, others Latin. All familiar to the man who works here. He moves slowly. Not because he is old, though he is in years, but because he knows better than to rush. Healing is not a quick art. It does not answer to haste. His hands are steady, and his mind, though softened by time, still remembers the quiet rhythms of care. At the table in front of him lies a woman, wrapped loosely in linen, breathing steadily, her face pale and damp with the sweat of pain just past. She has given birth not long ago. The child is in another room, safe in its father's arms, swaddled and swaying gently in the soft hum of family voices. But the woman remains here, resting, breathing, her body still aching from the long labor. The physician watches her a moment, not with worry, but with patient attention. Her eyelids flutter, her hands are relaxed now, and her breath, though slow, is smooth. Still, he prepares a draught. He reaches for a bowl, wide and cool, made of heavy clay, and begins to add the familiar ingredients. A small pinch of dried poppy. Not too much, just enough to ease the deep muscular pain without pulling her into dreams too long. A spoonful of warm honey, some powdered fig for strength, a few drops of water infused with valerian root, and a leaf of lemon balm for taste. He stirs slowly with a wooden rod, and the smell rises, warm, earthy, slightly sweet, and just faintly bitter. He pours the mixture into a small cup and sets it aside to cool. Behind him, another shelf holds surgical tools, bronze hooks and smooth bone probes polished with use. Not frightening, not here. They are part of the work. They rest silently, their edges dulled by oil, waiting for necessity. But tonight, there is no need for cutting or binding, only rest. He walks to another shelf, this one higher. From it, he takes a small jar with a narrow neck and a worn cork lid. Inside is a amber-colored balm made of crushed violet, olive oil, and powdered myrrh. He warms it in his hands and kneels beside the woman, gently massaging the mixture into her lower back and hips. His hands move slowly, with practiced care, never pressing too deep. The room smells now of herbs and sweat and violets, and there's something grounding in that scent. Something that feels like peace earned through effort, this kind of medicine. Quiet. Slow, herbal was not unusual in Rome, for all their public theaters and loud triumphs. Much of Roman life was private, careful, and quiet. Pain was not something to be conquered, it was something to be eased. managed, survived, and where the gods did not answer quickly, the earth often did. In Poppy and Mint, in Wind, the physician returns to his table and writes in a small wax tablet. He doesn't write much, just a note about the birth, the mixture, the mother's name, and the time. The record is not for science. It's for memory. So that next time, he'll remember the smell of the draft, the look of her face, the sound of the room as she drifted into sleep. The cup is cool now. He lifts it, walks to her side, and gently tilts it to her lips. She drinks without opening her eyes. The taste is familiar. Not pleasant, but not unpleasant either. Her body has done its part. Now it is time to let the plants do theirs elsewhere. In this house, in a chest that's rarely opened, there are stronger medicines. Powdered mandrake, dried henbane, distilled opium tincture, dark as ink. These are not used often. Only when suffering is deep and unbearable, or when death is near and mercy is needed. But they are part of the same tradition, not feared, not venerated. Simply there, ready, like old friends waiting to be called. The physician steps into the next room, where a small lamp glows and a boy is sleeping. His mother had brought him in earlier that day, coughing and unable to rest. A warm drink of licorice root and honey, sometime boiled in water and cooled with goat's milk. Now the child sleeps, one hand curled under his cheek, his face relaxed. The cough has softened to a whisper. All through Rome, in homes both rich and poor, physicians worked like this. Not all were as careful. Some rushed, some guessed, some cheated, but many were like this man, steady, devoted, tireless and gentle. They learned from old scrolls, yes. But more than that, they learned from watching, from listening, from preparing the same mixture dozens of times and adjusting. By feel, by scent, by intuition, outside, the wind moves through the trees. A dog barks distantly. Someone walks past with sandals scuffing stone. But here, inside, the world has narrowed to the weight of the draft, the softness of balm, the closing of eyelids, the long sigh of someone slipping into rest. You can almost hear the ancient heartbeat of the city. Not the fast thrum of marching feet or chariots clattering down stone roads, but the slower rhythm, the one beneath, the rhythm of care, of hands working by lamplight, of herbs growing and being gathered, of medicine practiced not for glory, but for peace. In this room. Pain is not a punishment. It is not dramatic. It simply is. And with enough time and enough plants and enough care, it softens. The world settles slowly when the sun begins to lower. In a Roman household tucked just beyond the bustle of the forum, the shadows stretch long across the courtyard. Birds make small, quick movements in the fig trees, and the stones underfoot hold just a whisper of the day's warmth. Not hot anymore. Only lingering, like a memory the ground hasn't yet forgotten. There's a woman sitting by the hearth, her hair pinned in a soft knot, her tunic smelling faintly of rosemary and wood smoke. Her hands are steady, folding dried leaves into a bundle of linen. A pot simmers quietly behind her, releasing lazy curls of steam that drift toward the rafters. And disappear. She isn't a priestess. She isn't famous. She isn't even particularly old. But she is known. On this street, in this small corner of the city, women come to her door with their tired limbs, with aching joints, with sleepless children, with empty bellies or nerves that won't settle, and she listens. She almost always listens before. She speaks. Tonight, her granddaughter sits beside her, small, attentive, eyes wide with the kind of silence only children keep when they know something important is being taught. The woman says very little. Instead, she guides the child's hand. Here, place the chamomile, just so. Yes, that's lemon balm. Crush it gently. No, not too much heat. Let the petals steep slowly. The girl nods. Her fingers still clumsy. Press the herbs into the linen. She sniffs them, then giggles, then stops giggling when her grandmother gives her a calm, amused glance. This is serious work. Not grand, not ceremonial, but quiet and necessary. Generations of women had done it, and many more would follow. Not all would be written down. Most would not. But that didn't make it any less real. In Rome. The lines between healer, wife, mother, and herbalist were often blurred. There were the official doctors, yes, mostly men, trained in schools and employed by the wealthy. But alongside them, and often before them, there were the women who knew the land. Who knew what plants softened pain, what teas invited sleep, which oils calmed a racing heart. This wasn't considered magic. Not to them. It was simply knowledge. Passed down hand to hand, season to season. In the kitchen, bundles of herbs hung. Drying from a line, sage, hyssop, lavender, and mint. Some were for taste, others for the body, a few for the mind. Poppy seeds were kept in a small clay bowl, covered by a lid carved with symbols worn almost smooth by time. Not to be used lightly, but not to be feared either. Just another ingredient like flour or vinegar or salt. Outside, in the garden, tall stalks of dill and fennel swayed softly in the early night breeze. The rosemary bushes rustled as a cat passed quietly through them. Somewhere nearby, water trickled from a cracked fountain, the sound so familiar that no one even noticed it. And over the garden wall, the scent of baked bread drifted on the air, mixed with the faint sweetness of blooming jasmine. The woman and her granddaughter moved to the garden. The girl carries a basket, not too big, not too small. They walk. Without talking much, it's a ritual almost. Not religious, but rhythmic. The older woman shows her which flowers to pluck now, which roots to leave until after the full moon, which leaves to dry and which to press fresh into oil. The child listens, watches, breathes in the scent of soil and blossom, of leaf and petal. They kneel side by side beneath the olive tree. The moon hasn't risen yet, but the stars are beginning to show, faint pinpricks of silver, soft and unhurried. In her hand, the grandmother holds a sprig of valerian. She crushes it between her fingers and lifts it to the girl's nose. It smells sharp, strange, but not unpleasant. This, she says softly, is for restless minds. For the nights when even warm milk won't help. Back inside, the hearth fire is burned low. The pot still simmers, now with a thicker brew, lavender, crushed almonds, a few slices of dried date, and a hint of clove. It's not meant to cure anything, just to soothe. The kind of tea made for the end of a long day. The kind that holds the body gently and reminds it to let go. Doubt they sit and sip in the quiet. The woman leans back against the wall. The girl watches. The flames? Neither speaks. There were words Romans used for women like this. Medica, if they were acknowledged healers. Or herbularia, if they were simply known to know plants. Sometimes even saga, which we might translate as wise woman, though in later times it came to mean witch. But in these homes, in these rooms, they were just nona or mater or amica, grandmother, mother, friend. They didn't shout their knowledge. They didn't write it down, but they remembered. And they remembered because someone else had taught them once, many years ago. Just like this, by firelight, with leaves on their fingertips and steam rising from a clay pot. And sometimes, when the city grew too loud, when the carts clattered down the stone streets, when voices rose in argument, when illness came through like smoke, people remembered them too. They came with coin or without, with thanks or only desperation, and still these women stirred their teas, rubbed oil into weary temples, whispered little things in the old ways, not because they believed in spells, but because comfort is its own kind of cure. Tonight, the house is quiet. The fire will be left to die out on its own. The herbs will be tied and hung to dry. The girl will fall asleep on a woven mat, her hair smelling faintly of mint and crushed petals. And the woman, the healer, the herbalist, the not quite witch, will sit a while longer, watching the coals fade to orange, the stars brighten overhead, and the work complete itself for the day. It's afternoon in Rome. But the air already feels heavy and slow, like a breath held just beneath the surface. Outside, the stone roads shimmer faintly with heat. The voices of the market have begun to quiet, just slightly, as people shift from their errands to their rituals. And across the city, from grand marble complexes to more modest neighborhood buildings, the Roman baths begin to fill. They do not fill with noise. Not yet. They fill with bodies, with slow-moving men and women wrapped in linen, their sandals, dusted with the powder of the street, with the gentle rhythm of footsteps on mosaic floors, with the faint squeak of wooden doors opening to thick, fragrant air dot inside the thermi. Everything feels distant. The air is heavy with moisture, and sound moves sluggishly, muffled by the damp. You can hear the dripping of water, steady, rhythmic, and the occasional low murmur of conversation, voices softened by steam. The walls are high and smooth, curving up toward narrow windows that let in light but no sound. Everything echoes, but gently dot at the entrance. A servant pours warm, scented oil into a shallow bowl, lavender perhaps or rosemary steeped in olive oil. Another man slowly brushes the mixture across his chest and shoulders, inhaling deeply. His eyes close and his hands move with the patience of habit. He's not in a hurry. No one here is. You might expect the baths to be loud, full of shouting and business, but not this hour. Not today. There are times for deals and gossip, yes. But there are also hours set aside for stillness, for quiet soaking, for the slow fading of thought. You walk deeper into the building, passing first through the apoditerium, the changing room, where tunics hang from wooden pegs and sandals lie scattered in the corners. Then into the tepidarium, the warm room. Not hot, not yet. Just warm enough to coax the muscles into looseness. The air is thick and soft. The walls are damp. You sit on a stone bench and breathe. Someone hands you a small clay cup. The liquid inside is cloudy, a mix of warm wine, water, and crushed herbs. It's not strong, not meant to intoxicate. Just to relax. Maybe it's post-vinegar wine softened with honey and mint. Or maybe something stronger, infused with fennel or anise. You sip it slowly. The warmth blooms behind your ribs, then radiates outward. Now the caldarium, the hot room. Steam pours from stone channels in the floor, rising like slow ghosts into the vaulted space. Your skin beads with moisture immediately. The stone is slick underfoot, warm to the touch, but never scalding. You sit along the edge of a shallow pool. The water steams, and the air smells of eucalyptus and thyme. You close your eyes. Time slips in here. It doesn't stop. It just fades. The minutes lose their edges. You aren't sure if you've been here for 5 minutes or 50. You drift. Bodies shift beside you. Slowly. No one speaks above a murmur. The world outside the bath, with its carts and markets and noise, has no weight here. In one corner. A man lies on a marble slab, wrapped in a thin towel, while an attendant rubs his back with thick salve. The mixture smells like crushed bay leaves and warmed almond oil. You watch, not out of curiosity, but because your eyes happen to rest there, and you have no reason to move them. The muscles under the man's skin loosen visibly. His mouth is slack. His fingers curl gently inward, relaxed. Women bathe too, though in separate chambers, quieter still. In the women's side of the baths, the water is cooler. The voices are lower. The cups of wine are sipped more slowly, and the herbs are often more carefully chosen. Chamomile, lavender, rose petal, and violet. One woman leans back against the rim of the pool, her braid resting like a rope on her shoulder, her fingertips trailing circles in the water. She is not thinking. Or if she is thinking in long, soft shapes. The servants here know which herbs to offer. Not formal doctors, but bath attendants, trained in the little ways that make a body forget its weight. They offer drinks, or oils, or small cloths, soaked in infusions to place over the eyes. A woman in the corner rubs her temples with balm made of poppy seed and goat fat. Not to sleep, not yet, but to prepare for sleep later. In the frigidarium, the cold room. Everything changes. Here, the air is sharp, the water bites a little, but even this is not shocking. Not dramatic, just enough to wake the skin. To remind you that you are still there. Some enter the cold pool with a gasp. Others slip in silently, breath held. The marble here is pale and cool beneath your feet. A final cleansing before the return to clothes, to sandals, to the world. Before you go, you sit once more in the tepidarium. The in-between place, warm but not demanding. Your limbs feel slow. Your head is soft, not dizzy. Not drunk, just detached slightly. As though someone had loosened the threads between your thoughts. The wine, the herbs, the water, the heat, it has all worked together to carry you to this place of stillness. This wasn't unusual. In Rome, the baths were daily, common, not reserved for royalty or ritual, just part of life. And the herbal mixtures, the wine, the scented balms and sleep-inducing oils, they were part of the bath, like the walls and the water. They weren't luxuries. They were routines. Mild intoxication wasn't indulgence. It was habit. You walk back through the changing room, your skin still damp, your feet silent on the floor. You don't remember where you put your tunic, but someone helps you find it. No words are needed. You're not in a rush to outside. The sky has begun to shift. The day is near its end. The sun has lowered, and the light is pale gold. You step into it slowly. Your body feels lighter, as though the heat has melted something inside you and left you just enough weight to move forward. The street sounds have returned, but they no longer touch you sharply. They drift like echoes behind glass. You might go home now, or you might walk a little. Let the breeze dry your hair. Let the cool air touch your neck. You are clean. You are soft, and your mind, like your limbs, floats. There is no wind in the necropolis. Only stillness and the quiet creak of leather sandals on dusty stone. The sun hangs lower now, not the fierce brightness of midday, but a deeper amber light that casts long shadows between the tombs. Nothing moves quickly here. Even the air seems to walk softly, trailing behind the mourners like a second veil. A family moves slowly down the path. They are dressed in gray and brown and white cloth, drawn over the head. Faces are calm, unreadable. Not stiff with sorrow, just still. The way people look when they've been carrying something heavy all day. Grief here isn't loud. It isn't a sudden wave. It's weight. A steady, familiar ache. And the Romans knew what to do with that dot. They brought wine, not as celebration, not even as comfort, but as offering, as bridge, as ritual. Because the dead were not gone, not entirely. They had simply moved into a place where speaking required. Different tools, smoke and scent and liquid poured into the earth dot at the tomb. There's no speech. Not yet, just the soft unpacking of baskets. A cloth spread on the stone. Bread, cheese, figs, and the wine, thick, dark, sweetened with honey and boiled down until it clings to the cup like syrup. A small vial of crushed herbs is uncorked. Myrrh, perhaps, or wormwood, or dried rosemary, and stirred into the wine with a wooden spoon. The eldest daughter carries the cup. She walks slowly to the tomb's opening and kneels. There, carved into the base of the stone, is a small tube, a libation pipe. It leads down to where the urn rests, or the bones, or the memory of what once was a body. She pours the wine, a thin, steady stream, into the earth. Her hand does not shake. She has done this before. The scent rises, mingling with the warmth of the sun and the dry dust of the path. A strange sweetness, not cloying, not sharp, just dense, full. It clings. To the nostrils, it lingers behind the tongue. It is not meant to please. It is meant to cross a boundary. Others follow. One by one, each person steps forward, says nothing, pours, waits. Not everyone uses words. Some close their eyes. Some breathe deeply. One child whispers something and sets down a flower. It's a ritual of slowness, of soft repetition. There is no urgency here. The dead are not in a rush. Once the wine is given, the people sit. There is no speech. No priest, just presence. They drink, too, not from the same cup, but from matching ones, passed hand to hand, filled from the same bottle. This wine is different from what they serve at dinner. Stronger, infused, a bit strange in the mouth. Like something pulled from a dream, they do not drink to forget. They drink to drift. The herbs used at funerals were chosen carefully. Some calmed the nerves, valerian, hyssop, mint. Others opened the mind, brought on lightheadedness, mugwort, myrrh, small doses of poppy. The goal was never oblivion. It was haze, softness, distance, enough to quiet the edges of the moment, but not to erase it. Romans believed that between the living and the dead there was a veil, and that wine, smoke, and herb could make it just a little thinner. Nearby, incense is lit. A cone of frankincense, placed carefully on a terracotta dish, begins to burn. The smoke doesn't rise quickly. It curls. It sways. It moves like thought, uncertain, slow, circling without shape. The scent is sharp at first, then softens, becoming almost sweet. A reminder of temples, of winter solstice, of childhood. Rites. Someone begins to hum. Not a song, exactly. Just a low note, held softly, almost beneath hearing. Another joins, then silence again. No one needs to say whose idea it was. It happens naturally. The way certain silences want to be filled. As the sun dips lower, the small gathering begins. To lean, not in sleep, but toward stillness. Bodies tilt inward. A man rests his back against the warm stone. A woman lays her head on her sister's lap. The cups are mostly empty now. The incense is only ash. But the air still carries the weight of what was burned. And here's the curious thing. No one looks sad. Tired, yes, worn perhaps, but not sad in the sharp, sudden way we often expect. From mourning, the Romans treated death like a season. Something that came and went. Something that changed the shape of things, but didn't end them. The soul lingered, they believed, in quiet places. And the living visited not to beg it back, but to sit with it. To share a little wine, a little warmth. And to remember. In the days that followed, the rituals would continue. More offerings. More small meals. On certain days. Especially in February. During the parentalia, families would return with garlands, with candles, with more wine. The dead were not just gone. They were part of the household still, just slightly out of reach. Like a dream you almost remember when you wake. Some tombs had gardens beside them. Others had benches built in. The idea was simple. You came not just to grieve, but to visit, to spend time. And so the intoxicants weren't meant to numb. They were meant to soften, to slow the living down enough to hear the silence, to smell the smoke, to feel the space the dead had left behind. Night approaches slowly in Rome. The last birds call out, then grow quiet. The tombs take on a darker hue, not black, but deep gray, like old parchment. The mourners begin to rise, stretching limbs now heavy with sun and memory. A few speak now, in low voices. Nothing ceremonial. Just the murmurs of those who've been sitting a long time. The cups are gathered. The cloth is folded. Someone pours the last of the wine onto the ground. Not into the tomb, but onto the roots of the cypress nearby. A gesture, not a rule. Something felt rather than instructed. As they walk back toward the city. The road crunches underfoot. Torches flicker in the distance. The walls of the houses take on a golden glow as the oil lamps are lit. The mourners do not hurry. Their pace is that of people who've been reminded of time, of its patience, of its endless unfolding. Later that night, perhaps one of them will dream. Not of the funeral, but of the scent of frankincense or the taste of honeyed wine or the shape of their loved one's hands. And they'll wake not in sadness, but with that strange, weighted calm that sometimes settles after grief, like fog lifting off the hills. The stairs creak a little as you climb them. Not loudly, just a soft, familiar complaint from old. Wood under tired feet. 3 floors up, maybe 4, depending how you count. The light fades quickly in here, and there's no candle yet. Just the pale gray of dusk sneaking in through the cracks in the shutters. The apartment is small, a single room, mostly. Stone walls, uneven floor, a curtain drawn across one corner where the children sleep. There's a pot on the brazier. It's not boiling, just gently steaming. Something herbal and bitter floats. On the air, not unpleasant, just earthy. A scent like fennel or maybe crushed celery leaves, softened by age and long use. It's familiar. The smell of evening. Of coming home. This is not a wealthy home. The furniture is spare. The walls are bare. The only decorations are a few clay figures set in a row on a shelf. Small household gods, worn smooth with years. Of prayer. A lamp glows in the corner, its flame no bigger than a fingertip. Shadows gather in the ceiling like dust, and yet there is warmth here. And routine. The kind that forms when people do the same things, in the same way, every night. The same tired hands lighting the fire. The same wooden spoon stirring the herbs. The same chipped cup, passed back and forth. The man of the house, a mason's assistant, sits on a low stool by the wall. His tunic is dusty. His knees ache. He has said almost nothing since coming in. But when the cup is handed to him, he takes it with both hands, holds it for a moment, then drinks. A small sip, then another. His wife sits beside him. She doesn't drink yet. She waits. Their son, maybe 9 or 10, lies on his stomach on a woven mat, drawing something in the soot with a stick. They are not celebrating anything. They're just unwinding, letting the day release its grip. The herbs in the pot were gathered weeks ago. Dried chamomile, thyme, a pinch of anise seed, boiled with wine dregs and a little barley water. There's no recipe, only memory. The memory of what helps the body soften, of what helps the nerves calm down, of what helps the dreams come without too much trouble. Poor Romans didn't have access to the more exotic substances. No rare incense, no imported spices, but they had wine even if it was watered down, sour, or cut with vinegar. They had herbs even if they grew them in pots on windowsills or picked them from the roadside. And they had knowledge, passed down not through books, but by gestures, by stories, by watching how mother brewed it, or how grandmother crushed it just so it wasn't about getting drunk. Not usually. Wine cost money, and sleep was too important. No, this was about creating a threshold, a gentle moment between day and night, between labor and rest. The poor didn't live soft lives, but they could end them softly. In the apartment. Next door, you can hear the muffled clatter of a clay cup being set down, followed by laughter. The laugh of someone worn out, someone already halfway to bed. A woman begins singing under her breath, an old lullaby, maybe, or just a tune with no words. It drifts through the walls like smoke, faint, slow, unfinished. Here in this room, the couple speaks at last. A few words about tomorrow, where he's working, what you buy at the market if the money stretches far enough. They speak slowly. There's no rush now. The heat of the day is long gone. What's left is warmth of another kind. The warmth that rises in the chest after a small cup of something bitter. The warmth of bodies close together, tired in the same way. The child dozes without being told. His head rests on his folded arms. His breath is steady. Tomorrow, he'll rise early and run through the streets barefoot, chasing the baker's boy, laughing in the dust. But now, his shoulders are slack, and his mouth hangs open just slightly. No one wakes him. The wife moves gently to cover him with a worn blanket. The husband watches. Outside the window, the sounds of Rome continue, but faintly. A cart rattles down the street. Someone calls out in the distance. A dog barks and then falls quiet. The city doesn't really sleep, but in rooms like this, sleep finds its way in, through routine, through silence, through steam and cup and careful sips taken in the dark. The Romans who lived here, in the upper floors of tenement buildings, far from the marbled halls of the rich, didn't have much. But they had ritual, and often that was enough. Some households kept small jars of poppy syrup, doled out carefully to restless children. Others soaked rags in wine and vinegar to cool hot heads, or burned dried mint to clear the air. Everything was simple, but it was all part of the same quiet culture, a culture that understood how to end the day gently, how to dim the senses without dulling them, how to slow down the body so that sleep could come. There's something deeply human about this, something that doesn't belong to any one class, or century, or city. The need for a soft landing at the end of a long day. The use of herbs, warmth, wine, and water to create a little peace in a noisy world. It didn't take wealth. It took intention. It took knowing which leaves to crush, and when to speak, and when to simply listen. Now, in the lamplight, the man's eyes are half closed. His cup is empty. He leans back against the wall, exhales through his nose. The woman sips from her own. She's added a few drops of honey this time. Just a little. Sweetness. Enough to soften the bitterness of the herbs. She looks down at her child, then up at her husband. She doesn't smile, but she looks content, or maybe just relieved, that the day is over, that the night is here, that they have made it once again to this small, quiet moment. Tomorrow will bring its own burdens. But for now, the apartment holds only stillness and breath, and a thin wisp of steam rising from the cup. The empire stretched wide, from misty highlands in the north to hot desert winds in the south, from olive groves in the west to temple cities in the east. It was a vast and complicated body, always in motion, always reshaping itself, like water in a great basin. But even the largest empires breathe. Even the loudest civilizations have their quiet hours. And Rome dreamed not with fanfare or fireworks. Not always with war drums or marble speeches, but in the slow hours. In the warm afternoons when nothing moved but the shadows. In the quiet apartments above the city streets. In the temples filled with smoke. In the slow tilt of a cup being lifted, the soft scrape of dried leaves in a mortar. The low hum of a prayer spoken mostly to oneself. By now, you've walked through. Rome's hidden rhythms, not the ones from the history books, not triumphal marches, not burning cities, not senators shouting in white togas, but the other Rome, the one that slept late, that drank slowly, that whispered. The Rome of farmers sipping posca as they sharpen their tools under the sun. The Rome of worn healers crushing poppy seeds for pain. Of mothers blowing gently across a bowl of herbal tea before handing it to a child. Of feasts that ended not with speeches, but with silence. This was a world where intoxication wasn't spectacle. It was structure. A soft framework holding the day together. Wine wasn't for celebration alone. It was a meal, a medicine, a routine. Strong herbs weren't kept behind locked doors. They grew in gardens, hung from kitchen beams, soaked in clay jars behind curtains. Incense didn't signal only the divine. It marked the passage of time. The scent of rosemary might mean morning prayers. Frankincense, a funeral. Lavender, rest. Laurel, cleansing. The air itself was often part of the ritual. Even emperors needed their sleep. And they too, despite their gold and noise, were wrapped in linen at night, massaged with oils. Shaded from flickering lamplight, they too asked their physicians for mixtures to ease the mind. For powders, for teas, for drops to slow the thoughts that grew too loud. They too eventually set aside their crowns and lay still. And then the priests, high in temple chambers, where candles flickered and smoke thickened like fog. They inhaled trance and waited for dreams. Sacred highs were common, soft-edged, slow, no rush, no climax, just drifting, floating, letting go. Worship, in those moments, was not performance. It was descent. You've met gladiators, softened by. Balm before battle. You've watched dinner guests nod off between courses. You've stepped into the bathhouse mist and emerged empty, featherlight. You've walked with mourners, half-drunk, speaking to their dead. You've listened to women whisper recipes for sleep while stirring herbs at dusk. You've sat with the poor in tenement rooms as they passed the cup, not to forget the day, but to soften its corners. All of it drowsy, ordinary human. There was no single moment when Rome got high. There was no one festival, no secret society. It wasn't a sudden decision or a hidden rebellion. It was simply how life moved, slowly, with weight. with repetition, with softness. Some days there was too much pain. And so there were poppies, some nights too little sleep. And so there were prayers, teas, smoke, some mornings too much noise in the head. And so a splash of vinegar wine, maybe some mint. A walk in the sun, a side-out roam did not always need to be alert. Sometimes it needed to rest. To float, to exhale, and yes, the empire had its sharp edges, its brutal moments, its violence, its ambitions too wide to hold. But in the cracks between those things, there was rest. There were petals drying on rooftops. There were old hands grinding, roots in the half-light. There were slow footsteps in sacred halls, the scent of burned bay leaf, the hush of candles. History likes its noise. It likes to shout about conquest, about genius, about collapse. But real life, the kind that repeats day after day, often whispers. It hums in kitchens, in garden beds, in warm stone walls at sunset. It slips into sleep slowly, without drama. And that is where Rome lived most of the time. Not in marble, but in memory. Not in wine, but in wine. Not in declarations, but in drowsiness. And perhaps that's where it remains. Not in textbooks. Not in ruins. But in the quiet things we still do without thinking. In the warm drink before bed. In the scented oil rubbed into tired skin. In the way we reach for calm at the end of a long day. We are not so different, you and I, and they were not so far from us. The Romans dot, so let the empire sleep now. Let the stories drift like incense smoke. Curling through time, never quite disappearing. Let the baths go quiet. Let the wine jugs empty, and rest in the shade. Let the herb bundles dry above the fire. Let the priest nod off in his chair. Let the mother hum a lullaby. Let the mason set down his tools. Let the feast fade into silence. Let the garden go still, and let us too drift. You've been walking through this story slowly, step by step. Through drowsy rooms and sun-warmed fields, through steamy halls and candlelit prayers. The journey was never meant to be fast. It was meant to lull, to hold you, to hum you toward rest, because Rome was not always awake, and neither must you be. Close your eyes. Breathe. The empire dreams. And now. Can you?